Just want everyone to know this is the share modification or lost share workshop. If you, all we're going to do is go through the instructions to how to change names on your shares, how to get a new share if your share has been lost. If you don't need any of those things, you don't need to say. Nothing else is going to happen tonight. Okay?
Whenever you're ready, David, that's what this meeting is about. It's all this meeting is about. You're welcome to stay though. I'm looking for the share that you have to turn in to get your money. Is it in your name only? Then you're not modifying it. Okay, so that's what this meeting is about, in case you wanted to add a daughter's name, or in case you wanted to remove somebody's name, because you're going to get separate checks in that case, if there were two people on it, and they would have to pay the same names possibly. So that's what this is, to correct that kind of a situation where you're put a daughter or son on and they don't want the tax consequences. That's what this is for.
Oh my God.
But you're welcome to stay.
Get together with you and say not to them. But you can't tell very well.
You can get a case by case.
You ready, Gary?
I'm ready anytime you are, sir. I think that's all.
Okay, good evening. Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. As the form's been handed out here.
Yes, they've been handed out.
Okay. All right, everyone. How many people are here for a check? Anybody for a check tonight?
We found some.
All right, that's a meeting in a couple of months. You know,
I tried.
I thought I'd start with that tonight because I had a lovely woman in the front here ask the afternoon about the check, and when I told her it wasn't tonight, she just got right up and left. So if any of you feel that way, head out now. As Bonnie said, we're here tonight to talk about changing the names on your share. If that's what you wish to do, you're at the right meeting. Or if you think you've lost your share and you need a new share, then you're at the right meeting. If you're here for any other reason, there are no donuts, there are no cookies, there's no coffee. Right, you know, I mean, if you're here, if you want to just,
budget.
you know, Bonnie's here, but,
That's all. You
well,
see me at
yeah.
that store every day.
you know, you're at the wrong meeting. All right, we each have a form. And by the way, this is a very important meeting.
Oh, that's right. That's
And
right.
largely, it
I'm going to
impacts a
Massachusetts.
number of people who aren't here because they're up north, maybe they're in Canada
You're staying.
or somewhere abroad or the United States, but they're not here. And they have to see the video. So what we would like to do is be sure that we don't have anyone talking during the video, Gary. And that you turn your cell phones down. Anybody here have a cell phone? Because it will ring, guaranteed, while you're in this meeting if it's on.
That's
So
right.
turn it down if you can.
I'll sit on it.
Had a woman this afternoon who wants to get her husband off the share. He wasn't here, so, and knew nothing about it. So, you know, we helped her, and we had someone in the audience go back and tell him he's out. So, you know, if you're here for that reason, you're going to learn how to do that as well. You know, let's look at the share modification form first. All right. As I mentioned earlier, and you know, we talked about this meeting and this workshop probably 6-8 months ago when we started this. We said, I had a lot of people ask me, you know, hey, I've got a situation. And I would say, well, the time will come when we'll talk about how you do that. We're not there yet. There was a lot of information that had to get out first. And then there was this important thing that had to happen called a vote. And you all had to vote in the sale. And as all of you know, it was overwhelming, the vote to go forward. But as I had mentioned to a couple of you before the meeting started, and I'm sure some of you know this already, 92 votes had to be thrown out, could not be counted. And by the way, they were yes votes, if I remember correctly, Bonnie and Gary. 92 votes that could not be counted because the form of either the proxy or the ballot was filled out incorrectly. You know, it was a hard form. You had to check yes or no. So, if you got that one wrong, there's a chance you might get this one wrong. Now, here's the difference. This is the one that tells us how to make the checkout. We can survive, and did survive, 92. I knew that cell phone was going to go off.
Go outside and do
I
it.
knew, you're
Jeannie.
the culprit.
Outside.
Jeannie, you can step right outside. Take your call. Okay, Jeannie. Let the record reflect Jeannie. Okay, so we don't want to get this wrong because this is how the check gets made out. So if you mean to cut somebody out of the money, you got to get this right. If you mean to make it different than your share, right, how the check gets paid, you got to make this right. So we're going to take the time to go through it. If you have special circumstances and you want to talk about that in private, you know, maybe you don't want to stand up and admit to what you're up to, you come up here afterward and we'll talk about it, okay? Then once you leave, we put it on the video for everybody to see. Okay? That's normally what we do. Okay, let's talk about the share modification. I never, ever, I have to say, I mean, some of the stories that I get are great. I mean, it's just amazing what people are up to around here. So I look forward to hearing yours later. The share modification form. Here's what we're doing. We're changing shares, if you wish, as I said before, to change how the check is made payable. There are tax consequences to this because whoever receives the check, there's a 1099 form that goes with it. And the IRS knows who the taxpayer is. So, why would you want to change a share? Well, for that reason, right? You may have your children on the share because if anything should happen to you, you want it to go to a child. Everything okay, Jeannie? We're good? All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. A child, you may have put a child or a number of children on there, but you don't want them to get the money now, so you want to remove them. All right. You may have a situation where you are remarried, and now you said, you know, time went by, and, you know, husband and wife, I want to make sure my spouse is on there. Or perhaps it's the converse. Maybe you've been divorced or you're separated or you don't want your spouse on there. Then you do a share modification. You may have an estate planning reason to do this. You may have formed a trust. And perhaps the share was put in your original name, your name, but now there's a trust that you have and you want this to go into your trust. There may be a share that was in a relative's name in your name and one has passed. Your relative has passed, perhaps a parent, and there's an estate plan that is pending and you want the check to go into the estate. And you don't want it to come to an individual but to the estate. So there are reasons, only you know why you're here and what you're thinking. But those are reasons why typically you would change a share designation. Now, how do you know to change it? Well, you know the circumstances of your life. And on top of that, you have to know how your share was originally prepared. In other words, how is it titled today? Does everybody here have a copy, at least a copy of their share? Is there anyone that would say, I don't know where my share is, or I don't have a copy? Okay, so we've got a pretty mixed group, and that's understandable. We know that about 85%, according to Gary Jones and Bonnie Richter, about 85% of the shares, the original shares, original gold embossed, issued share certificates are in the office, okay? They are in the records of the corporation. That means somewhere between 15, I'm told 80 to 85%. I'll make it a little bit more flexible. So there's about 15 to 20% of the original shares that are out among the shareholders, all right? So if you think about it, with 610 shareholders, we'll just say 600 shareholders, if 20% of the shares are not accounted for in the office, original shares, that means that about 120 shares are out there in the community, in the particular households. And of that 120, we don't know exactly how many are with banks, but we're guessing probably about 30% or so, about a third, are with a financial institution. We hope the financial institution has them. They're supposed to have them. In Gary's case, as he explained at the last meeting, Wells Fargo has lost his share and likely anyone else's share. So if your share is, if you think with Wells Fargo, it's probably not. Or at least they can't find it. That could be the same with other banks we don't know.
I heard Seacoast the same thing.
Seacoast, the same thing, Bonnie said. So if you're with Seacoast, you could have that same problem. And we're going to talk later about, well, what if I can't find my share, or what if we don't end up with all 610? And that's why we have the second form, which is the lost membership certificate form. We'll talk about that in a moment. First, we're going to start with the share modification form. I gave you the reasons why typically you want to fill one of these out. If you want to change the share, the reasons why you typically do. And what you'll need to do in looking at the form is put your date at the top and your lot number off to the right of the date. Date at the top, lot number off to the right. Gary reminded me this afternoon, I want to repeat it again for the evening crowd, that if your lot number is over 1,000, if your lot number is over 1,000, then your share number the number on your share is going to be different than your lot number. So keep in mind that, if you're lot 14, your share number is 14, right, Gary? But if you're lot 1,014,
Your share is 14.
is still 14. So just bear in mind that there could be a difference for some of you between your lot number and your share number. Now, I had a woman ask this afternoon, it's a good question, how do I know my share number? It's on your share. And another one asked me, how do I know if I have an original share versus a copy? Bonnie, you were kind enough to point this out. And we had, of course, we know the answer, but Bonnie, actually, we had a woman come up with an original share, and then we had a copy. Now, here's the difference. The original share has a gold embossed seal on the bottom versus just a black and white copy of a share. It has a gold embossed seal at the bottom, and it is also embossed with a green border. So it has a bright green or I guess evergreen border around it. So if you have that in your possession, you have an original share. If you have a black and white, you just have a copy of the original share. If you have nothing, I can't find it, go down to the office and see what they have for you. Here, I meant to ask, is it, if you don't have the original, you'll at least have a copy?
Oh, you should at least have a copy.
No, I mean, in the corporate records,
In the corporate record,
you'll have a copy. So if you go home tonight, or you've been looking and you can't find, an original or a copy, at least go down to the office and get a copy. See what they have. Of course, they may have your original, but take home a copy so you have a copy in your possession. We don't want your original share. I don't want anyone to come up here and think, I got to turn in my original now. Don't need an original share right now. Don't need it. I just need, if you're here and you intend to fill out the form, that we fill it out correctly. So you'll by filling out the form to change your share, you're going to get a replacement share. You're going to get a share that's going to replace the original that you have either in your possession or the corporation has in its possession for you. You'll be getting a replacement for that share if you fill this out. If you don't fill this out and turn it in, then whatever the original share says on it now is what you're going to keep, okay? And that's probably fine for the vast majority of the folks here. There's no change needed. And I don't mean here tonight, I mean here in the community. So let me clarify that. I assume you guys are here to learn about possibly changing your share. So we'll be issuing you a new share at the appropriate time, and at the appropriate time you'll be turning in the original that you have in your possession if we're changing it, right? So here's what you do with this. I said you put the date and the lot number, and then put the names of the shareholders as presently on your share. So if it's John and Betty Smith, you would put name of, or let's say it's John Smith, Betty Smith, and you named your son Robert Smith on the share. So we have John and Betty and Robert. Even though Robert's your son and he lives in Kalamazoo, we still want Robert on here. You put his name there because he's on the share. So we'll check. Gary would go back and look and say, yeah, that's right. The Smiths are on lot 11. And sure enough, it says John, Betty, and Robert on the share. So this matches. Now what you want to do is you want to take Robert off, in my example. You love Robert, he's a great son, you're happy he lives a long way away, and you don't intend to give him the money, or any part of it, right? So we're going to take Robert off. So you go down to the change request. It says, in the second bold item, change request, name of new shareholders. Well, we're going to keep, in my example, John and Betty on there. Okay. And then it says, you know, marital status, you'd say married. You want it to be joint, yes. And address of shareholders, you'd give us that, the telephone number. And we know you want to remove Robert. Now what if in the example it's different? What if the example is, you know, I want to add somebody. So my example changes. It could be anything. It could be, I've been married for 30 years, but I got a divorce. You know, I met a new person. You know, we're married now 5 years, and you know, I want to put the new person on there. You're going to put the name of the new person on there. Maybe your spouse passed away, and you've remarried. You put the new person on there if that's your desire. If your spouse passed away, or a party on the share passed away, and you don't have any other change, you really don't have a change, it's just somebody passed away. Right? Mother, you got the share because mom died, or spouse passed away, you do not have to do a share modification. This is only for the living. Anyone that has passed away does not impact your ability to get a check in your name. You simply provide a death certificate to Gary, certified death certificate, or Bonnie. We have a copy of the death certificate, then we know it's legit. Is that clear to everybody? The party at the bottom, all parties to the share, whether they're being removed or added, are going to have to sign this paper. And obviously, one way to think about it is, if they're dead, they can't sign it. So this is only for those that are with us. All right? And you can provide a copy of a will if need be, a trust if need be, and certainly a death certificate for the decedent. That we want to see. But we don't need. Now, there are complications. I mean, you know, there are certain family situations where it gets a little complicated. Mr. Happy has a little bit of a complication, but we've talked through it. We know how to work through his. There are others that have complications. We have a doozy this afternoon. We got a doozy. And there may be another doozy or two sitting out here or watching the video. We'll have some more doozies. But to make it simple as I can, because everybody's in a different situation. Again, dealing with someone on that share who's no longer with us, we just have to prove the death. We don't have to get any other signatures or issue any new shares. That's the simplest way to remember it. And then for those that we want to add who are living, we're making a change. Right? If we want to add them or subtract them and they're alive, then we have to fill this form out. Okay, any questions on that? All right, great. Then we're looking at the shareholder information at the top. The change request is the second column. And then the third is the property information. And that's all you have to do. Now, if you notice, your lot number is on a couple different spots here. That's kind of just to be sure you can put it down there twice and they're both the same. It's really what we want to get at, you know, make sure it's right. And the membership certificate number, and again, I said you're going to need to note that on here. You note that under property information. You're going to submit this back to the corporation because the corporation is who's going to issue you the new share. They're going to, at some point, say, turn in your old share, here's your new one. Gary would say, well, that's the closing on your share. When the time comes that we say to you, turn in the, and if the new one's already with the corporation, that's fine. Excuse me, the old one. If the existing share is with the corporation, you won't get a call from us saying, turn in your share. If it's with the corporation, we already have it. But if it's in your safe deposit box or elsewhere that you keep it, you'll get a call saying, we need you to turn in your share, we're ready to issue you the new one. And we'll have a separate meeting or workshop for that and for those folks. If you look at the bottom of the first sheet, and first page of the form, and you go over to the second page, you'll see there are signature blocks. And then there are notary provisions. Think of it this way, as I said earlier, every person has to sign it and have it notarized if they're either on the share, coming off the share, or being added to the share. In the rare situation where you're taking one person off and you're adding someone else, I say rare because I think that may have happened once that I can remember in one of these transactions. If that happens, I'm taking off one child, I'm adding another, or I'm taking off one live person, I'm adding another, whatever it may be. Everybody has to sign, and every signature has to be notarized. You can't take somebody off without them signing it. You can't add someone without them signing it. And every signature has to be notarized. We have to be sure you are who you say you are. Is there anyone here who isn't who they say they are? All right.
One day.
You were up.
No, do they have to be here if it's notarized?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
It's a good question. If you look at the notaries, and I know you haven't had a chance to yet, we actually have a form for Canada, and it occurred to me it needs to likely be translated into French if it's going up to Quebec. So we'll have some that'll be in French to go up to Canada for French Canadians. Anywhere in the United States or abroad, wherever they are, they can sign this and return it. Often, kids aren't around here, right? And then you just have them return it to you. Someone asked this today, and I thought it was a good question, and I want to remember the answer so I get it right. But no, I think the question was, what if I just want to send the signature page off rather than the form? Well, our view of it is you send them the form because we want them to know what they're signing. You could give us two forms back. You could give us a form with your signature on it, and you could send the form to New York State and have your other party sign it in New York State and return it, and I can have two and put them together. But I don't just want a signature page because then I don't know if they know what they signed and notarized. Not that anybody here would intentionally do that, but they could have, maybe in the afternoon they might have. So we just want to make sure that we get everything back, okay? And it's legit. Yes, sir.
Anybody in our office here, a notary?
Keith.
Chris, Keith is a notary.
Okay.
You can have any notary. But if you're I don't want a shareholder notarizing another shareholder. I had a shareholder come up today and say, well, I'm a notary, and I think they were going to charge $5 or $10 for everyone, or nothing. I just don't want that. It had nothing to do with the money. I just don't want that because you're a party to the transaction as a shareholder, and it would be better if you had an outside, so no one says there was something wrong done, or you did it for money or friendship, or just you were a neighbor and it turns out there's a mistake. All of these forms for share modifications, and we're going to get into next the lost share certificate, all of these forms have to be back by November 1st. If they're not back by November 1st, then we cannot count them. And it will be, the check would get issued the way the share is presently titled. Let me tell you why. Yeah, so you should be wondering, well, why November 1st? What's that? What's the big deal there? Okay. If you were here last week, Saturday, just a few days, 5 days ago, we talked about when the contract was approved by the board of directors that the closing date in the contract is November 20th. So that it is the intention of the seller and the buyer to close the transaction and for the money to exchange hands into the corporation on November 20th. There is an extension period of the contract. It could get extended out 30 more days to December 20th. But that will happen if either side needs to, for some particular reason, to extend. I would say it is more likely to be now on the buyer's side that they need an extension. Because
It was on our side.
well, and that's because we've decided to make November 1st the cutoff date. So we're not going to go past that for these forms, as an example, of these transactions. So we should be able, if we have everything in by November 1st, in the 20 days between the 1st and the 20th to document what we need to with the folks here, get them in, get all that processed. We can do that over the days we need. But if the buyer has an issue, and I say because of the buyer, there's a new survey being done of this property, new, like first time in 30 years, new. And, you know, things changed over that 30-year period from what I understand. Like a roadway taking out front, perimeter walls, lots of things move around in 30 years, fences, you know, things tend to happen. Documents get recorded. So when the surveyor is done with the survey and then we see if there's any problems with the boundary, we'll have a better idea. I'm hopeful not. But they have the right to come back and say you need to fix this or that. So that's something, for example, that could come up. All right, not anticipating it. If everything goes smoothly, and we are sitting here, knock on wood, at a point in this, now almost a year's worth of work that we're there, where we can simply say, you know, let's get these documents done. We have to come up with a hard date by which everything has to be turned in. We're saying November 1st. Still got all of September and the entire, 31 days of October. But we want everything in here November 1st so that if you're up north, you got enough time, Gary and Bonnie and the board, to mail it up and get it back. We can then close November 20th. If we close November 20th, checks should be available for distribution to shareholders within 3 weeks of closing. That puts you into mid-December. You'll have your check before Christmas. Not bad, right?
Not bad.
But if it gets extended to December, checks would not be available until January. All right? So the goal is, and the buyer, of course, is pushing as well as the seller to close this calendar year. So anyway, long story short, we want the forms back by November 1st. Those of you here tonight, not an issue for. People up north and abroad, probably more of an issue. Okay? Welcome. You can sign in, and you need a couple forms as well.
You have to sign in.
And you look like you ran through the park to get here, so.
Well, no, I was someplace else.
Oh,
And
all right. Now,
I have a question.
yes, sir.
I do. On the notary, there's 4 places for the notary. If it's a simple change, take my daughter off, then do I have to go any further than first page?
Yeah, because you're going to have 2 notaries, right? One for your signature. and one for your daughter. So the first page would be the notary for you, and the second page would be the notary for your daughter.
Unless you had the
Unless
same
she's right
notary
here.
doing both of them.
Is
at
she
the same
right here
time.
with?
No, it's set up for individual
I have to
notaries for
send it off.
signature. It's set up for one notary per signer.
Okay.
Okay, so yes, you would have two notaries. It would
Because
say
actually,
notary. It would just be
it's-
notarized. One's for you, one's for her.
Okay, so
Okay.
I will, the bottom one and then the next one, because there's two other ones.
Yeah, we had to do it that way because some people have 3, 4 names. But if you only have 2, then you only utilize 2.
That's
You
it.
utilize what you need, and you have plenty of room there if you need more than the average bear. Okay, Chris?
If we're putting this in the indemnity estate, what do you use for an address?
The executor, whoever has control of the estate.
The law office?
Can be, or it could be an individual, if it's whoever the personal representative or executor is, that would be the address. So if it's a lawyer or a law office, fine. If it's an individual like yourself or you and your brother, you can put your name on it as an address. All right, yes? Yes.
If they don't get all the shares in by November 1st, the shares itself, does the closing still go through or no?
Closing's going to go through. We're going to have all the shares in. If 1 or 2 people don't turn them in, I had a question this morning about someone who says, or this afternoon, hey, I'm not going to turn my share, you're just not going to get it, then that person would be subject to a legal proceeding. And we will issue a new share, we will issue a share for that person, and then we will have to bring a lawsuit against them to force them to turn in. But trust me, all shares will be in. And this is an important point. All shares have to be in, because we have to redeem 100% of the shares and pay out 100% of the proceeds. It's just a legal process, all right? So we need 100 shares in, or I should say 610 shares in, 100% of the shares in, 610. 11 now, I guess we have one other person, I guess who's okay, so 611, we'll have all 611, right? And one way or the other, that will happen. You don't want to be sued over that. Yes?
I know,
Somebody has like a builder's lien on their share. When does that come up?
All right, so let's talk about liens. All right, it could be a builder's lien because they put a roof on their home, or they put siding on their home. Believe it or not, folks that borrow money for whatever purpose will often offer their share as collateral, or a contractor, certainly a bank, a lender of some sort, would ask for the share as collateral. So it could come up in any variety of contexts. It could be a builder's lien, it could be a bank lien. But liens get dealt with by paying off the lien, right, to get the original share released. John McNaughton, who is the distribution agent for the transaction, was here this afternoon, is not here this evening. Is going to be getting payoff letters for everyone that has liens on their homes and shares. If it's just on your home, we don't need a payoff letter. If it's on the share and the home, we need a payoff letter. If the share is liened, meaning you pledged it as collateral for a loan to anyone, then there needs to be a payoff letter that's obtained. And how that money gets, how that lien gets released is through the money that you would be entitled to. So we went over this in one of the prior workshops. You know, for round numbers, if your check was $110,000, pick a number. Please don't hold me to any numbers here tonight. But if that were the amount and you owed a bank or a contractor, builder, $20,000, how much would you get? 90. Because of your 110, 20 has to be earmarked to pay off, in your example, a builder's lien. All right? So it's going to be incumbent. When we ask for an original share and you say, I can't produce the original, well, Gary, Bonnie, David, John is going to say, well, why? You know, well, it's with ABC Builder, or it's with Wells Fargo. Okay, well then we need a payoff letter from those folks, and we'll be working to get a payoff letter for the individual whose share is lien and has a loan, and that's how we will deal with it. If you have a lien on your share that is more than, and this is the Gary Jones example, that is more than the distribution, you got a problem. And we'll have to deal with that too. And I said to Gary, that's one of those, we cross the bridge, we get to it, because I've never seen that before. Could happen. Not saying it couldn't. But remember, your shares out here are valued at $20,000. If someone was foolish enough to loan you more than $110,000 or so on your share, let us know who that is, because there might be some people who just say that. Okay? All right.
Wait, we got another question.
Another question on the share bond. Yes, ma'am.
You probably already went through this, but I'm changing my name,
Yep. Oh, you're changing your name. Okay.
so do I just, what do I do?
We need to get a name change. The county court, you go down, you've
It's
done all
already-
that?
Oh, yeah.
I'll need to get a copy, certified copy of the name change certificate, all right? That's filed with the court to change your name.
I didn't go through the court.
You didn't go through the court.
I went to Social Security, and since my name has been with the military since 1977 or 76, they said I didn't need one.
All right. So you're going to bring us whatever you have in documentation and let us verify. If you have no documentation showing a
What do
name
you want?
change,
I got my military ID, I got my driver's license.
all in the new name,
Yeah.
right, bring us that.
Is that the same name on the share?
No.
That's
What she's saying is the name has changed. So what?
But I think I still got my old Social Security number.
I'm sure you do. The social security number will not change just because of a name change. What you're explaining candidly is something that is foreign to me. When I have done name changes or seen them, they've been done through a court order. There's a
what I thought.
mechanism by which you go down to the courthouse, you fill out a form, they change your name. Anybody aware of that? That's the typical way. I'm sure what you did is fine,
No,
but you're
I
going
mean,
to just
that's
have,
what I
just
thought.
produce us what you have and let us look at it and
And-
let us investigate it, okay?
Yeah, because, well, I thought I had to do that, and they told me over at the VA, just
You
go
didn't have
down
to.
to Social Security.
So let us see that. I think Bonnie knows who you are.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
So
know.
we'll get it
So
taken
does
care of,
Gary.
okay? If we have to issue you a new share of the new name, it's fine. We'll probably have you sign a form similar to this lost share certificate form, which I'm going to go over in a moment, so that you indemnify the corporation. But other than that, we'll be fine. All right, we're going to move into that new document, okay? It's called Lost Membership Certificate. Everybody have one of those? Okay, this applies if you cannot find your original membership certificate or share. If you can't find it, all you have is the copy. Or you go down to the office thinking they have it and they say, we don't have the original, right? You got a copy. Remember we talked about the copy is black and white. The originals are all bordered in green with a gold emboss or seal on them. If you can't find that original, or the office doesn't have that original, or you think it's with a bank, and you know it should be with the bank, but the bank can't find it. Any of those circumstances arise, you're going to sign a form called Lost Membership Certificate. At the top, it says certification and indemnification as to lost membership certificate. This is because if a corporation has issued stock, or in the case of a cooperative, a membership certificate, which is tantamount or equal to stock in a public company, or a private company for that matter, and it gets lost, for the corporation to issue replacement security or replacement certificate here, it has to protect itself, because there could be a circumstance where you say you can't find the share, and in fact the share is with a builder's lien in the hands of a builder, or Uncle Louie has it because Uncle Louie lent you 10 grand to buy your Ford Galaxy, right? So you got to be careful as a corporation that you don't get defrauded. And so there are protective measures to make sure that we don't have a contingent liability. We don't want Uncle Louie walking in here after the closing and saying, hey, where's my 110? Which can happen. So what do? We say to all of you out there, our shareholders, Give us your original share. And for those of you that say, you know, I can't find it, and it can happen. It could be an honest situation. You've looked everywhere, right? Some of us can't find our keys in the morning. Some of us can't find, you know, our wallets. We know that we're, particularly men, right? We're looking for stuff, we never find it. That's why we get married. So, no, not really. But you women know that you find things and we lose things. That's the way it works. So if we can't find the certificate, right, and we've looked high and low and we can't find it, then you come to us. You come to Uncle Gary over here at the end and you say, Gary, I can't find my share. After Gary gets done lambasting you for losing your share, we will then have you fill out this lost membership certificate. And it's a big deal. Let me read it to you so you know what you're signing. Because you're verifying that you've used your best efforts to find it. You've acknowledged that you are the rightful owner. No one else has a lien on it. But that you've lost it after, you know, using your best efforts to find it. You can't find it. And that if you ever find it, you're going to turn it back into Uncle Gary. He's going to be here for years and years after just waiting.
He's going to Disney.
For lost shares. We're going to designate him as the forever man here, to be here. No. But if you lose it, you have to turn it back in. And on top of that, you have to indemnify the corporation and acknowledge that you can be sued for lying if you committed a fraud. So I'm going to go through it with you. Let's look at number one. And right above one, it says the owner certifies that. Number one, owner is the legal and beneficial owner of membership certificate number, whatever it is that you've lost. I had one person ask me if I lost it, how do I know the number on it? It's true. Well, Uncle Gary, don't you know? Number two, the membership certificate has not been liened, endorsed, assigned, transferred, or otherwise disposed of. Meaning, you aren't pulling a fast one on us. You haven't given it out to somebody else. That's Chris's builder's lien example. Number three, the owner, who's going to sign below, is entitled to full possession of the certificate. No one else but you, in other words, is entitled to own it. Number four, the membership certificate's been lost. And having asserted your best efforts to locate it, you've been unable to locate it. Number five, you agree that if you ever locate it, you're going to immediately surrender it to the co-op, like I said. Number six, you're responsible for and you indemnify the cooperative from any damage, loss, cost, expense, attorney's fees, legal proceedings, anything. Should a claim be made because of the claim it was misplaced or lost? So if a second person, in my Uncle Louie example, comes up and wants the money with your share, but in fact, it's now going to require a second payoff, you'd be responsible. You could be sued for that. So number seven, the reason you give this affidavit and indemnification is for the purpose of inducing the co-op to issue a replacement certificate. They're going to issue you a new one. You're claiming it's lost, so you get a new one. And then the last one is, number eight, that you acknowledge upon the issuance of the replacement that you will surrender the replacement in exchange for a distribution that you're entitled to under the plan of dissolution. So here's how it works, and I want everyone to understand this. We have to collect all the original certificates. Remember I said that earlier? We're going to have 100% of them in our possession, one way or the other, come November 1st. If you're among the people or folks who can't find your share, then what would happen is you would sign one of these documents, and the corporation's going to issue you a brand new share in the name or names that you want. And you're then going to surrender that share back immediately to the corporation. It gets issued, and then it gets surrendered back, so it goes back. No different than if we had called you and said, turn in the original and you had it in your drawer. Once we give it to you, this replacement, go put it in your drawer, pretend it was there for 20 years, and then a half hour later you come back and you give it to Uncle Gary. And that way, we have your original share. It just happened to be a replacement share. All right? And we also have your indemnification form that says if you were fibbing or lying or pulling one on us, you can be held liable for that. Nobody wants to be liable, do they? All right. So that's how that works. You will sign it. You will print your name below it. You'll put your lot number, and it will get notarized. And it will probably be Keith that'll notarize it in the office for a lost indemnity. Certainly at that point, you're not sending this around to other people. Or you could be. I mean, there could be an example where, yeah, I mean, if you lost a share and Gary or Bonnie go in and look it up and it shows 2 or 3 names on there, and, maybe one of them is, it could be the same thing as the other example. One of them's in Kalamazoo. Well, Kalamazoo has to sign. Or if one of them's passed away, we need a death certificate. You know, it's no different. Whoever was on that share that got lost, we've got to cover that person's signature. We've got to cover that person agreeing it's lost. Because there could be the example, frankly, where you say it's lost, but it really isn't lost. It was, your ex-wife has it. She thought she was getting in half, and you're cutting her out. Okay, speaking of cutting out, these two are on their way out of here, right? Okay. All right, good.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Take care. If you need anything at all, you let us know. Yes, ma'am.
Will do.
I
Let Uncle
was,
Gary know.
my husband told me that the office had the original,
Could be. Yeah.
because all I got is
Yeah,
black
we went
copy.
through that before you came in. About 85%, we think 80 to 85% of the originals are in the office. So you're going to have to go check and verify that. Simple as that.
Thank you.
Okay? Yes, ma'am. All right, any other questions? This has been a great meeting. I'm going to tell you, much better than the afternoon. Much better. You know why? You were at both. That's why you're giving me that look. You know why? I like it better because there's less questions. No, but seriously, either I did a better job or there's just less questions for some reason. I want you all to ask any question you have. But that's what we're here for. And, sometimes I try to be a little cute up here. I'm not. I'm trying to get through it in a way that hopefully is explanatory, but also isn't real boring. Because this is legal stuff. It can tend to be pretty boring stuff. So I'm trying to get through it in a way that gives you an opportunity to ask questions, not be afraid to ask questions. Yes, ma'am.
If we want to find out about the taxes, is it better to go back and watch the film when the tax person
You're
was
talking
here?
about individual tax?
Yes.
Yeah. You can absolutely go back and see that video when the CPAs gave the workshop on taxes. I think that's a good way for you to look at it. Yes, that would be your best bet on that. But let me say this about taxes. This is a very important point. It was made by John McNaughton today. I told Bonnie and Gary I was going to repeat this. Really, really important. I emphasized at the beginning of the meeting tonight that everyone that gets a distribution gets a 1099 form, right? Which is essentially an IRS tax form, denoting a taxable distribution to the taxpayer. So I use Bonnie as an example. Bonnie is a U.S. citizen. Her and Jake, married couple, homesteaders in Florida. They're going to get, just like everybody else here is going to get, a 1099, right, for their check distribution. There may be, in their case, an opportunity to take deduction for the distribution. They've lived in the community more than 2 years. I don't know of anything that missing here. And so that's an example where...
The only thing I'm going to clarify is they have to live in the same residence.
Yes, you do. Live in the same residence.
So if you lived at,
And you have to own the residence.
Yeah, this came up.
We had someone who said, I have had to share more than 2 years, but they don't own the residence because they only have a life estate. This is a gentleman who will remain nameless, but he has a life estate to live here, granted through a will, and he does not own the home. So it's not a principal residence deduction available to him. The title's not in his name. The share is And the proceeds of a share of that will be tantamount to sale of stock. He's gonna have a capital gain, he's gonna pay the 20% or whatever it ends up
But
being.
the other one that
Yeah.
Judd answered was somebody who had lived in the current house he's in for a year, had been in the community
A
much
long time.
longer, but he'd lived in a
He
different house.
moved from one home to another, and he'd not been in that home for long enough. So I can't tell you or give you individual tax advice. I'm not going to do that. You're going to need to watch that video and/or see a tax advisor. One of the things we are going to do, however, let me make this point first. This is what John McNaughton, the point he made today. Everybody's getting a 1099 form. It's why these documents have to be right. Because the taxpayers,
1099S, they said, though, right?
yes, 1099. It's going to denote who the taxpayers are on it, right? So we need to be sure that's correct. And, you know, you're going to have forms to fill out in that regard before you get a check. There are forms that have to be filled out before you get a check, and Mr. McNaughton is going to handle that, right, Gary? All right, so you'll get another whack at asking questions about that down the road. And, you know, if you have a certain situation which can be impacted by personal residence status, you know, homestead status, marital status, it can be impacted by a lot of things, citizen status. You know, those are things that are particular to you, that there's no one size fits all. So that's why we have to be very careful with 611 shareholders in here. Watch the video, talk to a CPA or tax advisor. John made the point today, though, that he would be happy to get an IRS qualified registration agent to assist in this transaction, and we look forward to that because that allows us to have unity in the process. What happens, people run off and they start talking to people, or they go down to the IRS office or they call and they screw everything up. And this happens particularly, believe it or not, Julie, people in Canada who will call ahead of time and say, I've got this deal in the United States, this is what's happening, and then you're talking to an IRS agent that says, well, send me the deed, or send me something and I can advise you, or do you have this? They don't understand, because if you don't give good information in to the person you're seeking advice from, what happens? You get bad information out. And so we want to have one voice for everyone and one party helping do it with these filings and so forth. So we're going to have that available to you, okay? I think that's a good thing. All right, so thank you very much. Any individual questions you have, come on up and ask us. Otherwise, we're going to adjourn the workshop. Hope you have a good weekend.
I just have one question as far as they close in November, and we have to stop paying our rent to EOS in December.
January.
We're closing November?
Yep.
Okay, so I was gonna say, otherwise they could charge us 3%.
Yeah, no.